We had something happen today that is really pretty unprecedented. I think it is unprecedented. And that is somebody on the inside of the Supreme Court um, leaked a first draft of an opinion by Justice Samuel Alito that would strike down Roe v. Wade. Now, we all know Roe v. Wade is the case that allowed for abortion, all abortion laws to be at the state level to be eliminated based on some basic criteria that were set up, and really laid the predicate for America being an abortion nation. It's been in effect. The law was, I think, 74, 75. The law was done. And it's been in effect for a long time. The court has been moving in the direction of allowing more state freedom to deal with abortions, to be able to say, okay, in certain circumstances, abortions are illegal. And it appears from what Chief Justice Roberts has stated is a real live, the actual first draft. They are going to strike that down, and they're going to leave it up to the states to determine what the laws should be according to abortion. Returning, essentially saying the standards in New York are different than the standards and ethos in Mississippi or South Dakota or Texas or virtually anywhere. So if New York wants to have one set of rules, and California wants to have a set of rules, and Washington State wants to have a set of rules, and Montana wants to have a different set of rules, and you just go through every state. It's up to those state legislators to make those determinations, not the federal government. This is really a return to the idea that, first of all, that dismissal of the idea that abortion is a right. It was written into the Constitution by the court when they did Roe v. Wade. There was never before any kind of right associated that was similar to what Roe v. Wade put out there. But so it eliminates that idea. But most importantly, it actually creates an environment where we have the 10th Amendment becomes important, that the idea that the states should have primacy and decide on making laws like this. It allows for flexibility where Governor of Virginia can come in and say, I want to have, we want to have abortions up to birth. And if you can get the state house to agree with it, then you can do that. Governor of Wyoming can come in and say, we don't want to have abortions at all. And if the state house agrees with that, there would be no abortions allowed in Wyoming. And making a state by state decision is the constitutional way to do it. If Congress wanted to pass a law, then the Supreme Court would have to determine whether or not that law was constitutional. But remember, Roe v. Wade occurred absent any congressional law. There's never an underlying law that supported it. It was straight up. It was made up out of whole cloth by an interpretation of the 14th Amendment that says you have a right to privacy. And as a result, you ended up with this kind of political opinion becoming the law of the land. And if Alito's draft holds up, and it does appear from reporting that it was 5-4 vote. But if Alito's draft holds up, then clearly there will be states will be allowed to determine what laws they want to have. Let's talk about some simple stuff about abortion as a whole. And we don't do abortion, Americans for Limited Government. We tend to try to stick to more in terms of the economic issues, and the government regulatory issues, and things where you have big giant government putting its boot on your neck. But let me just talk a little bit about how this is a big government issue. Right now, Americans spend millions upon millions of dollars to prop up Planned Parenthood, a group that is highly controversial, a group that has been accused and proven, based on videotapes, to sell baby body parts for profit, meaning they allow they delay abortions until the last possible minute, so they have the most viable baby possible that they can then use as a parts machine and sell the parts around the country for purposes of either experimentation or for transplants. And so they've got, this is a business to them, and the American taxpayers are funding them to tune of tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars a year. This puts a lot of the Planned Parenthood people out of business. And what's more, it really will become dubious as to whether or not funding Planned Parenthood, the taxpayers will be funding Planned Parenthood, particularly in states where there is not, or abortion isn't allowed. And those states can say, we don't want Planned Parenthood here, and send them away. So so it affects a lot of different things. But for all the Mexico City policy, where Americans were prohibited, our government was prohibited from exporting abortion policies around the world. That fits in as well. You've got the Hyde Amendment, which basically supposedly stops federal funding of abortions. Yet at the same moment, we send hundreds of millions to Planned Parenthood, which commits most of the abortions in America. But the left is going to try to say that by ending abortion in some states, it's a war on the poor. Let's be clear. Let's just be clear. 100% straightforward. There is a reason why, when you do a map of where the Planned Parenthood clinics are in the lowest income areas, primarily Black and Hispanic, primarily Black. There's a reason why Blacks had between 40 and 45% of the abortions in the country over the last 40 years, and whites had half that percentage in terms of the number of babies that were aborted. So what you've got is there's been a determination by the left that they are going to target Black neighborhoods for abortions. The person who founded Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, stated that she wanted abortions in those neighborhoods because we need to pull out the weeds. Let's be clear: abortion and Planned Parenthood are racist. Planned Parenthood is racist at its core. It proves it by where they put their operations. They prove it every single day by where they put their operations and where they focus their effort to create abortions, to encourage abortions. And so when the Democrats come down and say this is an attack on the poor, please understand, the attack on the poor is what the Democrats have been doing by funding Planned Parenthood. Nothing more, nothing less. And your taxpayer dollars have been used to do that. And now, if the Supreme Court does decide that Planned Parenthood, that abortion is that Roe v. Wade's overturned, if they do hold to that decision, then here's the deal: there's absolutely no reason to continue funding Planned Parenthood. And if states want to fund their own Planned Parenthoods, let them do it. But in terms of the federal taxpayer, that should no longer be a burden on the federal taxpayer, and that would be a good thing. So that's the abortion piece of this. The piece that is less focused on, because it's a little more esoteric, the piece that's less focused on is the idea that the Supreme Court justices can no longer share information. They can no longer share opinions in advance. The fact that this trust has been breached, it's really hard to put Humpty Dumpty back together again once that trust is breached. And when this occurred, it has to create a real rift in the court. the one thing in the court that's always been that's at least been true, and from the people I know, some who serve, others who are clerks, is that the justices genuinely get along. They know they're working together for a long time. They all have different lives. They all have different ideas, but they take their legal opinions and they put it in one silo, and they put how they are personally in another silo. And so you'll see some of the most like Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You see that they really genuinely enjoyed each other. There's so judicial, because these people are engaged in deep legal philosophical thought and contest and pushing back and forth in terms of that. You develop a great deal of respect for the people who you're kind of arguing against, because you're thinking, what argument are they going to do? How do I beat this argument? Where's the law really lead me? And those with, that is an intellectual exercise, and it's an intellectual exercise that everybody afterwards gets to read what you produce and decide, well, we know who had the votes, but who had the arguments. And that's why dissenting opinions are so important. That's gonna be threatened by this. This leak threatens that. How do you trust having those kind of conversations with a colleague if that conversation could end up on the front page of the Washington Post? You can't. How do you send over the draft of the opinion, which happens for every single opinion? How do you send it over to the other 8 justices without the knowledge, without some knowledge or expectation that's going to be leaked? And does that affect when you send it? Because what the left's doing with this is they're now having protests at the Supreme Court. They've had to put barriers up around the Supreme Court to keep protesters out. So we have now the Supreme Court will be under siege until this case gets released. And it's directly because somebody in that court violated the trust and did so deliberately. And those protests are part of that plan to try to affect the decision of the court and change the decision of the court using not the law, but the raw power of fear that crazy people can put into anybody's heads. And these justices are human, just like each one of us. And and the fact is, they live in neighborhoods just like each one of us. And it's just not they don't live in barricaded buildings. They don't live in a White House. They intermingle. They shop at the local shopping center, just like everybody else. So, and it's kind of shocking for people to, you can go to a shopping center here and you can actually see a Supreme Court justice, stopped at the 7-Eleven, getting a candy bar. So they're not, they're just like you and me, and they're out in the public just like you and me, and they're vulnerable because of that reason, just like you and me. And whoever did this changes that sense of safety, changes everything. And that person, there's no amount of punishment that's too much for that person once they're discovered. With that, I'm going to kind of let it go. I appreciate all you guys hanging in. It's been 29 minutes. And with that, we're Americans for Limited Government, getliberty.org. Encourage you to take action by clicking on the description below this video on Biden's Ministry of Truth. And if you aren't already signed up, please sign up for our daily newsletter at getliberty.org. Just subscribe. It's free, and it's I've already doing a Seinfeld routine, and I'd say it's free and it's fabulous. So anyway, let's with that, thank you very much, and we'll get with you next time.